My dad hunts crocodiles but is terrified of the dark. I finally know why. My father taught me how to break a man's nose with the heel of my hand before he taught me how to ride a bike. He is, and always has been, the toughest son of a bitch I've ever known. Except when the lights go out. He sleeps with a salt lamp burning in the corner of his room, a dim orange glow that he pretends is for my mother's sake. He never walks to his truck in the dark without flipping on the porch light first. If he's driving at night, and I'm with him, he'll talk the whole way, filling the space with noise, as if the silence might let something else in. For years, I just thought it was a quirk. A weird crack in the foundation of a man built like a brick house. Then, one night when I was 16, he told me why. He grew up in a place that barely qualified as a town. It was more of a suggestion. A handful of cinder block houses scattered along a dusty road that eventually gave up and collapsed into a muddy river. He was the second youngest of 9 kids, which meant he was basically invisible. A ghost in his own home. He spent most of his time outside trying to outrun the noise of the house, the shouting that always got worse when his own father came home smelling of cane liquor and rage. Life was simple, he said, simple and hard. There was no electricity in most homes. The nights were absolute, a thick, heavy blackness that swallowed sounds whole. One of the few people in the neighborhood with a generator and a television was an old man named Senor Amador, who lived in a small, neat house right near the riverbank. Every evening, just as the sun began to bleed into the horizon, Amador would open his living room window. He'd turn on his old black and white set, and all the neighborhood kids would gather on the dirt patch outside. They'd sit in a silent, cross-legged crescent, watching wrestlers or grainy cartoons flicker behind the glass. It was magic, my dad told me, his voice low. We didn't know what the hell we were watching half the time, but it was light. It was a story that wasn't ours. That evening started like any other. The air was thick and wet, the kind of heavy stillness that comes before a bad storm. The sky was a bruised purple. He was sitting next to his friend Isidro, their shoulders touching. Isidro nudged him. Gotta go. Mama will skin me if I'm out when the rain hits. The other kids started to get the same idea, peeling off in 2s and 3s, their bare feet kicking up dust as they ran. The rumors had been bad that summer. Whispers of a man in the reeds, of things being taken from people's yards. Nothing concrete, just a general feeling that the darkness had grown teeth. Isidro asked my dad to walk with him. He shook his head. I didn't want to go home, he told me, and he didn't have to explain why. I knew the stories. His father had been home for a week, a dark storm cloud in the tiny house. Going home meant finding a corner and making yourself small. I figured I'd wait it out, he said. My mom would come looking for me eventually. He stayed, watching the fuzzy gray figures on the screen, the sound too muffled to make out. He wasn't really watching. He was just not being at home. A few minutes later, Senor Amador's silhouette appeared in the window. Mijo, his voice was soft but firm. Ya es noche. Vete a casa. Go home. My dad nodded, grabbed the scuffed leather ball he took everywhere, and mumbled, Si, senor. He saw the window slide shut. The generator sputtered off. The little square of magic winked out, and the world went completely dark. For a second, the only light was the fat yellow moon hanging in the sky. He should have gone home. He knows that. But the thought of his father's heavy breathing in the next room, of the tension that coiled in the air of that house, it was worse than the dark. So he walked the few steps to the riverbank and sat down. The moon was so bright, it looked like a hole punched in the sky, spilling pale light all over the water. It silvered the edges of the reeds and made the mud banks glow. The air smelled of wet earth and something else, something like rotting fish. He wasn't there for 5 minutes when he heard it. There wasn't a scream, not at first. It was a gasp, a sharp, wet intake of breath, like someone had been punched in the gut. It came from the thick brush that choked the river's edge, maybe 50 yards away. He froze. Every kid in that town knew 2 things the river gives and the river takes. You don't go looking for things in the dark. But then came another sound, a panicked thrashing. Something, or someone, was trying to break through the vegetation. He stood up. He told me he doesn't know why. It wasn't bravery. It was like his body was being pulled by a string. He took a few steps along the bank, his soccer ball clutched tight under his arm. That's when she broke through. A woman. She was completely naked, her skin so pale in the moonlight it looked like bone. Her hair was a wild, dark mess, tangled with leaves and twigs. She stumbled out of the brush and onto the muddy flat, her feet sinking into the sludge. My dad was 9 years old. He said his brain just stopped working. He did the only thing it could think to do. He dropped into the tall, sharp grass that grew along the bank, pressing his face into the dirt. He smelled worms and damp soil. He watched her through the green stalks. She took a few clumsy steps, her chest heaving, and he saw why she was moving so slowly. A dark line ran from her stomach down her thigh. It wasn't a shadow. It was wet. It glistened. With every step she took, she left a dark print in the moonlit mud. She was so close. He could hear her breathing, a series of ragged, watery hiccups. Then the bushes she'd come from rustled again. A man stepped out. He was naked too, tall and thin. In his right hand, he held something long and slender that caught the moonlight like a sliver of glass. A filleting knife. My dad knew the man. It was the man who cleaned fish at the market, my dad whispered, his eyes fixed on the linoleum of our kitchen floor. The one with the dead eyes. He'd give us kids scraps for our cat sometimes. My dad watched, his own lungs burning, as the man walked calmly toward her. He wasn't rushing. He moved with a purpose that was 1,000 times more terrifying than rage. The woman turned, a strangled sob escaping her lips. She tried to raise her hands. The man didn't say a word. He just stepped forward, slick and quick like an eel, and drove the knife into her back, just below the shoulder blade. She fell forward onto her hands and knees. He pulled the knife out with a soft, wet sound, and then he did it again and again, not with anger, but with a calm, methodical rhythm, like he was just finishing a job. The woman's sobs turned into a low, gurgling moan, and then nothing. The only sounds left were the man's steady breathing and the gentle lap of the river against the bank. My dad didn't move. He watched as the man stood over her body for a long moment. Then he calmly walked to the river's edge, knelt, and washed the knife in the water. He washed his hands. He stood up, and without a single look back, disappeared into the same patch of brush he'd come from. My dad lay there, his face pressed into the earth, for what felt like hours. He counted his own heartbeats, sure that each one was loud enough for the fishmonger to hear, to come back for him. He stayed until the moon had crawled halfway across the sky. Then he ran. He didn't know he'd dropped his ball. He didn't know his feet were cut and bleeding. He just ran, the air tearing at his lungs, until he burst through the flimsy door of his house. The house was quiet. His mother was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. As his eyes adjusted, he saw the moonlight from the window fall across her face. Her lip was split and swollen. His father was passed out in his bedroom. She saw him, saw the state of him, and her one good eye widened. "Where have you been?" He couldn't form words. He just pointed back in the direction of the river and started to sob, the whole story pouring out of him in a choked, terrified torrent. She listened, her hand flying to her mouth. The anger in her face melted into horror, then into a sick, gray relief. Because she knew, and he knew. If she'd come looking for him, as she'd planned, she would have walked right into him. The man from the market. Her path would have crossed his in the dark. The police came the next day. A woman's body had been found by some fishermen. They called her La Mujer del Rio, the river woman. They questioned my dad. He was a shaking, terrified mess. He told them he saw a shadow, a big man he didn't recognize, a stranger. He never told them it was the fishmonger. He was 9 years old. He'd had to see that man every week at the market for the next 10 years. He'd watch him weigh out shrimp, his long, clean fingers wrapping the paper. Sometimes the man would look up and nod at him, and my dad would feel the mud and the grass and the cold river water all over again. They never caught anyone. The town decided it was a transient, some devil passing through on his way to hell. The story became a ghost story, a warning to keep your kids inside after dark. When my father finished telling me this, the kitchen was silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. His hands, the same hands that could build a wall or fix an engine, were shaking. He looked at me, his eyes hollowed out. "So," he said, his voice suddenly rough, trying to be normal. "You want to get some ice cream?" I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That night, I finally understood. It wasn't the dark my father was afraid of. It was the things that feel safe in it. It was the quiet neighbors, the friendly faces, the people you see every day. He wasn't afraid of monsters. He was afraid of men. And he knew better than anyone that you don't always need a light to see them. But sometimes it helps you pretend they aren't there.